I think here's the issue, right? The way that we measure success in most roles in the companies today is we're more interested in being efficient than we are in being effective. And so I've always said, if you ask the wrong question, you'll always get the wrong answer, even if you like it. And so I think that's the struggle.
Welcome to the B2B Digital Marketer Podcast, a podcast helping you to end your struggle with digital marketing, helping you to pave a new and better path to target and capture your ideal customer. Each week, we teach you how insiders and experts debunk the dreary and become engines of innovation. Now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Okay, B2B DM gang, man, we're going to have a good discussion today because I've already had a little bit, and we're going to make sure that we bring it on the show because I have Ken Lundin on the show with me today. Ken, welcome. What is
going on? Let's go. This is going to be a blast. I'm excited about this.
I am too. Because we both have learned that, we just are attempting to do wrong less.
Absolutely. We've done enough wrong that now we can just do a little bit less wrong. So it's perfect.
That's exactly right. So we were talking about a couple different things, but and before we get into that, Ken, if you could just share a little bit about your background and how you're actually going to add value to our listeners and watchers today.
Oh, that's an interesting way to ask the question. So yeah, I'll get after that. So a couple things. So the easy part of the background, I've been in sales since the get, right? My mom likes to say that I was selling her when I was a child, so nothing has changed since that. From my selling intangibles to tangibles all the way through. And I think probably the place that we end up adding the most value for when we talk on podcasts, when we talk to listeners, is pretty simple. It starts with a really bad moment. 2011, I answered the door with my 12-year-old, and she kind of saddled up next to me. And it was somebody who had bought my house in an auction. So back in 8 and 9, if you remember, they had this thing where you could refinance your house, but you had to let your house fall 90 days behind. It was my first business that I had owned, was in the home improvement space. And it was that moment that I realized just how fleeting anything can be. And so one of the things we talk to our clients about, that we had to move within the next 3 weeks by New Year's. So that happened in the first week of December. We had to move by January 1st. So what all that really means is this. I get the risk that an entrepreneur, a CEO, a founder takes. And so what we try to do is take those ideas and those experiences where we've seen what that looks like, and then to be able to see around corners for people and discuss topics that actually can impact your world and your business. Now, I promise you this, a lot of the stuff I'm going to say is not the stuff that everybody's been telling you, because I think it's more important to tell you the truth. So it all kind of comes back to that foundational moment for me where I realized what it was to be an entrepreneur and a CEO and have it all on the line. So now today, fast forward, we've got a consulting company where we help B2B brands grow and accelerate their sales so they never have to go through that moment that I went through.
Well, thanks for sharing that. And coming to realization and accepting, those types of things is, and then also taking it as fuel for moving forward is something that a lot of people can't do either. And so, for us, and why I wanted you on the B2B Digital Marketer Show is because for me, what I see is, and it was happening prior to COVID. Now it's happening a little bit more, but I still don't see the acceleration where it needs to be. And you and I kind of talked about this in regards to, when I'm talking about complex sales, when I'm talking about, relationships that have to be built in the B2B world, not the transactional stuff like, hey, we'll do your janitorial stuff. Yeah. It's that, we've got to create a relationship, sales, marketing, and now revenue operations, which a lot of people are growing or putting, and I shouldn't say a lot, some are, because they're trying to bridge all these gaps.
Yeah. Those who understand the importance of it.
Yes. And it's so, okay. So, it's that it's putting these things together, understanding that it's an ecosystem, and, trying to get some acceleration out of it. And that's why I wanted you on the show, because I think, like you said, you'll just kind of tell it how it is.
Yeah.
Now, you and I were talking about, nesting, PTSD, shell shocked, and all those kind of things in regards to COVID. And I would like us to continue that conversation. So why are some not moving?
Yeah. So I think, it's interesting because you get to choose how to respond to things. So coming out of, say, my bankruptcy in 2011, it was a 2.5-year recovery time, like emotionally. Right. And so I kind of harken back on that when I start to talk about COVID, because many businesses just said, they kind of laid down. They said, well, it's out of our control. And one of the big things that I think we goof up all the time as business owners is we go, oh, well, it's on this other thing to happen that I have no control over that will make me happy. Right. And so we sit back in this environment where we just let things happen to us. And so I think a lot of businesses, as you were saying, were very shell shocked. Obviously, COVID essentially came out of nowhere. But then what happened was they didn't think in terms of pivoting. And now pivoting, let's be clear, it's probably the most overused term in business, right? It's, hey, you're going to pivot. It's basically a way for you to avoid saying, well, that didn't work. Right. And so, but the interesting thing about this is that it's all a question of mentality as you own a business, or if you're in a leadership position on a marketing agency, or you're the marketer on top of everything else. The idea that you have to understand is this: where am I getting my information? Because I think what happened during COVID is people started to absorb information instead of create information. And so we started letting it be done to us instead of not. That put us in a shell shock period where, we'll talk specifically about how that's impacted businesses. But so instead of coming out of this dip that we all had, you kind of stayed there. And instead of plateauing at the top, you kind of had a valley that you've just been coasting along. And even if your revenues recovered, I would argue that if you haven't accelerated back to pre-2020 levels, so if you had 2020, if you were a $5 million company with aspirations to be 7, or in 2019, if you're not at 7, like 2020 never existed, then you failed to make the appropriate changes and you still are in that shell shock category.
Okay, so that's pretty impactful. I mean, right there. One of the things that we talked about that could potentially be fueling some of this issue is the lowering of standards. Mm-hmm. So I think that could be perceived in a lot of different ways. You and I started on a particular dialogue in regards to lowering of standards, and maybe we should just start there. So when we talked about lowering our standards and that's impacting the outcome, what might we have done?
Oh goodness, it's so first of all, gets me all worked up. So first of all, I think it's been something that's been processed. So I don't think COVID created bad sales behaviors. I think it exposed them. Right. So I think traditionally, if you look at it, the statistics say that, and marketers, you got to know this because you've got to be able to connect across. And that's why the enablement between marketing and sales and the connection matters so much. But here's the statistic that as a marketer, that's going to irritate the ever-living heck out of you. And that is 75% of salespeople miss quota. Okay, so that's first. Let's just know that that's been a historic number for the last, 5 years that they've ever they've researched it longer, but I know it's true for probably the last 4 or 5 years. So that's first thing. And then what happened with COVID is it accelerated bad behaviors because it loosened the standards with which we want to be perceived as a profession. So here's what I mean by that. Virtual selling, first of all, we acted like it was new. Okay, our clients, and we've got clients who have gone from negative $2 million in net income to a sale to a publicly traded company in the middle of COVID. And all they've been doing is virtually selling for the last 5 years that I've been with them. Right. Very rarely are they on site. So much so that I'd yell at the salespeople about it. Go see somebody. Right. So that's first. So virtual selling is not new. What virtual selling does, though, is it says you, the relationship builder, the person, the man, the woman who can go in and shake a hand and earn a little bit of cred, and they start to like you, and therefore you can get a deal you might not have got. You're dead. You can't get that relationship anymore. And so virtual selling's made us lazy. So as an example, just look at how many meetings you've been on with people who are trying to either sell something, market something, or need to look important, and they don't have lighting. It's a dark cave that they're calling you from. Or how many meetings have you been in now in the Zoom, Microsoft Teams world where people are wearing t-shirts? Now I know I'll get whatever. Like, yeah, I'm an old guy. I turned 50 this week, right? But I'll tell you this, the truth is, if you were going to meet somebody in person, you'd at least put on your favorite t-shirt, right? You'd put on your nicer t-shirt, your nicer golf shirt, your nicer button down. You'd wear it with, and we do a lot with tech companies. So I do a lot of tech casual, but it's a button down and jeans, and so I think that's what's happened, honestly. And I think I'm probably on a little bit of a tirade and I could go for 174 minutes, but we've loosened the standards associated with how we present ourselves to our prospects. And therefore we've allowed the prospects to actually commoditize us with all of our competitors. And then just check off a list of who meets the best features and functionality. And that, unfortunately, has turned into a UI UX competition. All they care about is their ability to see what they've always done, instead of for you to help show them how your solution is going to make them do so much more.
You might drop the mic on that stuff right there. Okay, so all right. And as I start thinking about that and going back to how we try to Band-Aid some of these problems, right? Because we've seen it and we're like, oh, well, this is going to fix that. Well, what are some of the Band-Aids that you've seen where you've just kind of just scratched your head and go, what are you thinking?
Yeah. So I think the first big Band-Aid is that all of a sudden people are buying virtual selling classes. Here, look at this. Put your team on the phone with me for 12 minutes and I'll show them how to present themselves and I'll do it for free. I mean, it's ridiculous that this is what we think it's come down to. So, because what really is happening is they're not good sellers. We just said 75% of salespeople don't traditionally make quota. They're not good sellers. They don't know how to hold a good discovery. They don't know how to expose latent needs. So as a really quick example of the difference between being a good seller and exposing latent needs and being somebody who just takes orders, let's do this. All right, so play this game with me, Jim. I have a white pill that relieves pain, okay? I have this white pill that relieves pain. You have a migraine. Your history says that migraine typically lasts about 4 hours. My pill is $5,000. Are you going to buy my pill or are you going to deal with the migraine?
I'm going to deal with the migraine.
Right. Now let's say the same thing. I have a $5,000 pill still. It's a pain reliever. You find out that pain is not a migraine, but it's a tumor. My pain reliever, because I didn't give you all the stuff on it, my pain reliever will actually cure your tumor. How many are you going to buy?
I'm going to buy your whole lot.
Right. See, and that's the difference. It's the difference, especially when you talk about technology or services sales. We tend to be somebody selling something as an aspirin when it actually is something that has a massive amount of additional impact, but we don't tend to connect the dots. And so we turn into this feature-driven thing. So marketers, where they can really lean in and help sales, is help with the stories around what the client needs to be an outcome, because that's the issue that drives me nuts too. Like if you're a marketer listening to this, know something. Your personas stink. The work you're doing around niching and personas is not good enough. And I can prove it to you, because you're basing it on what somebody tells you they're going to sell at, instead of where your solution makes the biggest impact and knowing what it is in their world, in their terms. You've got to be able to communicate it. I communicated that pain reliever pill because I found out you had a tumor because I did good discovery.
Okay, so when being somebody who double majored in finance and real estate, as you're talking, I start going to my finance background and I start looking at significant impacts to the business. Yeah. And is that what you're talking about? Now I can look at what you think is just essential spec, is essentially a boulder. And here, let's show how this thing, you can either use it as a weapon against your competition. And I know this is getting primeval, but, just think about it in just basic terms, to actually knock down your competition, or you can beat yourself over the head with it. Right. So it's, so is it a situation where, if we look at these things a little bit differently from a financial perspective and tell the stories from a financial perspective, it's going to have a bigger impact? Or how can we tell a better story?
I would argue that it's actually not the financial impact, and that's not what you want to do first. Because when you go to finances, you desensitize it and you remove the emotion from the decision. And when you remove the emotion from the decision, you are still on a checklist in column A through F of all your competitors. Right. So that's first. So what I would say is this. It's more like this. And I'll give you a specific example. So there are tons of, and I'm just kind of using the software tech stuff because it's a place where we play a lot. Most of the softwares that are out there that you can buy for your own business, right, say, we'll give you better reporting. I'll pay $49.99 a month for better reporting if my reporting sucks. Okay. But I don't wake up any morning saying I'm going to spend $50,000 to see prettier PDFs and columns arranged differently. What I will say is this. You can show me how that report is going to help me make better business decisions, which are going to income my ability to generate income, decrease expense or risk, then I'm in. And so it's not even a lot of times people skip that chasm, right? What they do is they go all the way to financial impact instead of sitting in the moment and going, this is what's actually going to happen. We're going to do this by this because of this. And so then you leave it up to your prospect or your client to do this mental gymnastics thing. And I think that your question's fantastic because too many people get a little lazy and they'll go, man, I don't know how to sell this or arm my sellers. Man, I'll create a financial impact spreadsheet, right? And it just desensitizes it. The financial impact thing, if you're selling something that's $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, okay, and it's going to make $1 million impact, fine. But that's way back in the back end of the sales process.
Okay, so that may bring us back to something that I also wanted to talk about when you start talking about maybe the sales alpha roadmap, which is something that, you help organizations to put in to execute better. So I've often there's a couple things that I find. Sometimes people are trying to go too fast, and then like you were saying, maybe they desensitize the scenario and the situation. They maybe, extend things, too long than they need to be, because of other factors. So if you could tell us a little bit about the sales alpha roadmap and how sequentially or a process or strategically, we need to put things in a certain place in order to be able to execute.
Sure. So let's talk about the fundamental challenge around sales. So quick, and I'll go there real quick. The fundamental challenge is this. The companies who get the most money typically have technical founders, right? They typically have people who are product experts. They help create the product. They help do the thing, right? So that's kind of one. So with that being said, they don't have any expertise in sales. Second, even if you get somebody who's business related and say they were finance related, right? They typically don't understand sales. And so what they feel happens is they feel sales is this, black box where you pour resources into the top of it. It whirls around behind this unseen area. And then you're hoping a sale drops out. So what the sales alpha roadmap does is it provides a specific process that says, look, you can create predictable, systematic, scalable sales results by doing this. Because, it's our argument that, sales is a systematic process and it doesn't matter from company to company. All your companies are different, your product offerings are different, but the process of growing sales is the same. So what we did is created this process, and it's essentially four phases that go from kind of post-revenue startup all the way through to publicly traded company. And so the first phase is launch, and that's about getting to product market fit, right? And everybody rushes through this phase because they think product market fit is, I got somebody to tell me they liked my stuff, right? It's the first key is they got to vote with their wallet instead of voting with their hearts. And so you got to get somebody to do that. And then in addition to that, like my friends at GrowthX say, you look for Mr. Right now instead of Mr. Right. And so you're going to be iterative in this phase. And if you're not going through that with a specific customer feedback loop, I promise you speeding through this phase has really significant financial consequences because it actually increases your total customer acquisition costs for the rest of the time the company exists. So that's the first thing. From there, okay, let's say we get through that. We've done the appropriate stuff. We're going to move on what we call lift, which is where we're trying to gain altitude and implement process, right? Product market fit first, got a process around figuring it out. Then we're going to come in and we're going to put sales process in place because we want to get to a place where things are predictable. This is exactly where many, many businesses say, $1.5 million to probably 10 to 12 million really, really start to struggle because the founder is going from founder-led sales to trying to hire a sales force. And they go like this: Ken, I'm not a salesperson, but I sell better than every single salesperson I've ever hired. Right. And that's because we haven't taken it out and put this process in place that becomes repeatable. And that's a combination of technology, know-how, documentation, RevOps, all that other silly stuff, and then quickly we start to talk about, we've got all that in place, and then we've had some success. So we go through our locate phase, which we want to make sure that we're making strategic decisions about where we're going and what our actual path is. The larger you get as a company, and I would even say it happens early, but the larger you get, the amount of decisions you can make that can distract your entire organization from the critical mission gets just, they're coming across your desk. I mean, you might as well have a grocery store conveyor belt, just kind of going, just kind of pushing straight across. And then after that, it's about how do we continue to maintain level, flight, and grow. And that's about working with a seasoned management team and putting in all the processes that are associated with growing them. We've got companies that we've taken from, 98 million to 200 million, and then we have $1 billion clients in this range. So as you can see, the whole point and the point of that comment was it goes really from kind of post-revenue too. But if you hurry through any single stage, the consequences, like your CAC could go up 10%. Now think about this. If my customer acquisition cost goes up 10% because I'm not speaking to my market, because I don't have this in place, that's 10% that's directly off your net income from that number, right? It may not be a full 10%, but if it's, let's say your CAC increases by $250 a customer and you're adding 1,000 customers, it gets to be real money. So yeah, that's kind of I apologize, I go drone, but that's our process, because we believe that you have to follow a process if you want to systematically grow sales.
Well, okay. So even when you're talking, I'm starting to look again, and I'm seeing this very clear line, well, maybe not so clear anymore, between the whole marketing, lead gen, all of that piece, branding,
Yep,
brand building, all of that. And what the parts that you're talking about is, if I'm sitting here as a salesperson and I'm relying heavily on, sales qualified leads, and they're not coming, and I'm doing all of my part, and putting these things in place, isn't that just creating an even stronger rift between the two? How do we fix that?
Absolutely. And so when we work with companies, we work across the entire company. So most of our engagements are like more, I want to say consulting, but I hate the word because it's not true, because we do a lot of the operationalizing of the work we do. Whereas a traditional consultant comes in, shows you a PowerPoint and says, hey, you figure it out. So we're actually helping. So we work a lot with the marketing departments or the outsourced marketing agencies that our clients are using. And I think there's probably two things. I think marketing needs to redefine where it gets its impact and what attribution matters. So, right, a lot of times marketing says, and I've seen this, I was working with one of the top 100 companies in the world from a revenue perspective about 2 years ago. And they were like, well, marketing's job ends when we collect the email address. Well, first of all, if your only goal is to measure getting to the email address, there's 1,000 ways you can do that will never generate a sale, right? So that's kind of first thing. So I think that's first. Second is marketing. The number one thing you can do for your company is push back on whether or not you're communicating the messaging and the way your prospect would speak about it and care about it. I don't care that you've got the prettiest screen. I don't care that you have the best customer service. What I care about is that you can solve a problem that is strategically important to me in my job for the next 12 to 18 months. What is that? Push on your sales team, push on your people, do the customer interviews. Because yes, if you're generating poor leads, yes, that's going to create a bigger rift. I'm not going to let sales off the hook though. Okay. Sales has to be better. Sales has to do a better job of not just kind of being check, trying to take orders. They have to do a better job as well. So it's, kind of equally on both sides, we can actually make some help.
So in a lot of organizations, there's this new role, and I'm starting to see more and more of it, which is, a chief revenue officer. Is this the person who's supposed to solve the rift issues? I mean, what is this person supposed to be doing, and do we even need them?
It beats the heck out of me. And the truth is this, and the reason I say that is because titles are so just silly, right? Go to any bank and they got 7,427, VPs, and they have 6 people that are below that. So I'm sarcastic. Here I am. So that's part of the problem, right? Second is, yes, but the issue that companies have, and small companies have it when they try to hire a VP of sales, as much as big companies have it when they're trying to solve larger problems, is that what they say is they say this. They go, Jim, here's the deal. We want to take a cross-functional role that there's no way in the world you could possibly have experience across all the pieces of the puzzle, and we're going to make you responsible for it. You know, and you know what I say? I go, how much is the money? Because that's it's worth the risk. Oh, I can figure it out. And it doesn't serve the organization. You know, they end up putting SDRs back in marketing, which I'm not saying they should be or they shouldn't be. They end up revenue operations as a technology play. I mean, then you're doing that. And then you got enablement. Like, we've worked with enablement departments, which actually just turned into parts of the company that made PowerPoints for salespeople. Like, I think you just have to slow down and be more intentional. We always say slow down to speed up, because I think here's the issue, right? The way that we measure success in most roles in the companies today is we're more interested in being efficient than we are in being effective. And so I've always said, if you ask the wrong question, you'll always get the wrong answer, even if you like it. And so I think that's the struggle.
Okay. So then what is a good question that a B2B digital marketer, someone who's in part, responsible for the whole online sales, being able to provide a good, sales qualified lead so that sales can do their job? What are some of the questions that a B2B digital marketer should be asking themselves today?
Yeah. Hey, let's get gutsy. Okay. The number one question that you should be asking yourself is this: what percentage of sales qualified leads, or sales qualified as opposed to sales accepted, right? Sales qualified leads. So somebody raised their hand, said they wanted a meeting. That's the sales qualified lead, right? Marketing qualified, they just haven't hit our website a bunch of times. Sales qualified leads. What percentage of sales qualified leads that take a first meeting end up in the second meeting? That's the first question, because the number, and now it's a responsibility between sales and marketing. But even if your sales stays stagnant and status quo, you can watch whether or not it moves based upon the quality of the leads. Typically what you see is for kind of average sales forces, that's 25 to 30%. Like, say an SDR took it as an example, and then it ends up being 50 to 60% for the best sales forces in the world. But think about that. The exact same amount of leads create 2 times the number of opportunities. So what I would say is, if you're in marketing, the smartest questions you can ask, if you truly want to be tied to revenue and have attribution, is how do I influence that number? Because that's the quality of the lead coming across, right? The same thing with MQL. So let's say that you have marketing qualified leads and they're pushed to, say, your telephone team, your SDRs. Are those converting in like an outbound sales campaign at a rate that's at least 2.5x of what the regular outbound sales campaigns are converting at? Those 2 metrics alone are how you're going to help accelerate sales. And I promise you, you will stand out in the world of marketers in a massive way, because I can tell you this. Honestly, I haven't seen many marketers who really care about revenue. They only care about getting to the metric that lets them appear to care about revenue.
Well, that's my little piece of the world that I'm being held accountable to, which I don't even, that's a whole different thing and discussion that I don't care for.
Well, trust me, I've given sales hack, I've given the CRO hack. So it was time that I gave marketers a little bit of a hard time.
Okay. So, but if it causes pause and it enables us to do, the bounce that you're talking about, meaning that now I have scenarios and situations where my clients are actually exceeding, pre-COVID levels, and they're continuing to go on their path of growth. We need to listen. Okay. So if I start looking at, even talking about the whole Band-Aid thing, you were mentioning a bunch of things that we do from a Band-Aid perspective that, do we really need to be doing those things? Rev ops, marketing ops, sales ops, revenue gen. Heck, we didn't even get into the whole client success and retention piece. That's a whole nother element. But if you were to say opportunities and think about the organization. You talked about that, $2 million in revenue types of organization, and even that, $200+ million revenue organization. What are some of the similar things that they're struggling with?
Here's the secret. Ready? The same stuff. Like, okay, you guys want to make this hard, right? I sat in the boardroom of the 127th largest company in the world and asked them all the same questions. And they're not the 127th today, so you'll never know who I was talking to. And I asked him, how do you guys handle, like, from a sales perspective, how do you handle onboarding? How does this go? How does this go? How does this go? And you know what he said? He has the exact same problems. He didn't say it in relation to those smaller companies. It's just they have larger problems at scale. And so the number one thing we see across digital marketing agencies and that we see internal marketing teams struggle with is they're not comfortable pushing back on the actual persona and niche and then delivering messaging in their words. They're not comfortable finding a way to get in front of prospects and customers and actually ask them a couple key questions. Like, if you're a marketer, get in front of the perfect customers in your organization. Okay, so say you got 5 of them, maybe you got 500 of them, I don't know, but you got 5 of them, and I'd probably do a few more than that. Get in front of them and say the following: hey, so what made you decide to work with us? And then the next question is, and what would be most devastating if we didn't exist? Because guess what? Your marketing agency, your marketing component, your sales team is not answering that other question. And that's the one that's going to sell a bunch of your stuff.
Okay. And I'd like to actually peel that back a little bit, because I've asked that question. And I've even not an exact same words, but very similar type of concept is, why did you decide to do business with us? And then what ends up happening oftentimes is they start answering the question along these lines. Well, when we started working with you, it caused this and happened. I said, no. That's not the answer I want. The answer I want is, before you started actually using our services or solution, why did you decide right then and there? You don't have the experience. You don't have the evidence yet.
Yep.
I mean, so I'd like to differentiate even down to that level, because that's where you start actually putting emotion, back into the decision-making process and understanding it better. Do you see that differently, or how can we enhance?
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Because the thing we missed out is what was the agenda for that call? And like I teach salespeople, anybody, right? The agenda is what sets the precedent for how the outs of that call is going to go. And so the agenda in that call is the important point to set the framework, right? So it's like, hey, so just, appreciate you spending some time getting on the phone today. What I'm really interested in, we're trying to do some research to better understand how we can serve you, the challenges that you've gone through, and the challenges that you were facing prior to working with us from a business perspective. So I'm trying to get them away from features and benefits. From there, we'd love to hear more about what your experience has been. What do you love? And then, by the way, the next one you can ask if you really want product development to love you is, hey, what's the biggest problem you can't solve today that you'd gladly pay to solve? So there's another component to it. But yeah, you got to set it up. You're exactly right. You have to set it up with, hey, so just so you remember, because I did this because we just did some case studies with our clients. Hey, just so you remember, when we met, you'd been going through 2.5 years of declining sales, and you were tapped out on your credit lines, and this was going on. So that's where you are there. And then last year you sold your company. So talk to me a little bit about what was going on emotionally there, and what were some of the things you were most concerned about, right? Move it away, because they will, they'll always look to their desk for the very tactical answer, because it's the easiest thing to connect to. So as an example, like when we talk to salespeople, just to stretch a point to make a point, we say, ask this question in the discovery. Hey, so assume for a second that you've decided to make this change. What do you hope it actually does for your business in the next 12 to 18 months? Right? Trying to move past it. I call it lifting your eyes off the table. So same thing. You're absolutely right. You have to reframe it. And I think the agenda about how you set that conversation is the most important point.
Man, okay. So this, I can actually share with you that from a both sales perspective and a marketing perspective, a lot of the things that have been discussed on this particular episode are value nuggets, man. So talking about taking it from a repurposing perspective that can help that entire revenue generation
Yeah.
could be helpful. Okay, so let's throw in, the customer retention piece, because you kind of opened the doorway by asking those questions.
Darn it, sitting on the stand.
Darn. Now, so there's this constant battle that I often see played out, and oftentimes it's a self-serving thing that happens with people who are trying to sell some software. But anyway, let's look past that. We
won't. I'm going to come back to it. Go ahead.
I probably. Okay, so talking about organizational growth, right? Acceleration. We're talking about X multiples, all that kind of stuff. Is people will say, hey, retaining customers, is X percent, more cost effective than going out and find new ones. But yet, when you start looking at organizational growth, my multiples are going to come in with, let's just say, make it easy and say new logos, right? Help us understand this battle between retention impact and new logo impact.
Yeah, so I think what you did there is you muddled the truth. So I think you pulled truth from both sides, and that's where the confusion can be in that question. So the answer is this: the multiple comes from total cash flow, total sales growth, right? And right now, by the way, if you own a software or technology company right now and you aren't planning and you have any desire at all to sell in the next 3 years, you better get on the horse, because the multiples are through the roof. So side note, right? Just macro level stuff. But here's the issue. It depends on your distribution of accounts, right? So your multiple can come in. Let's say that you're a $10 million company and you have a disproportionate amount of revenue wrapped up in one or two clients. Then 100% your multiple will be hit, because you have a concentration of risk in, say, 40% of your book of business that is two clients that if something happened out of your control, they could disappear. Right. So that's first. So yes, adding new logos there is paramount to diversify the risk if we're talking about expansion of enterprise value. On the other hand, let's assume for a second that you have a pretty good blend of customers, no overt risk, no client over 5% of total revenue, which is kind of perfect mix, right? Let's say that that's the case. The reason that most people say retention isn't the path to growth is because they don't understand it. And so I'm going to give you a piece of it, and then I'm going to give you and then I'm going to get on my soapbox and give you a tirade. So there's two things coming. The piece is this: retention. The fastest path to growth from retention is actually expansion of spend, right? The theory is, and I do it all the time, the theory is if I bought something from you, it came through well, etc., I'll continue to buy. It's probably one of the massive reasons that everybody still shops at Amazon, right? The experience is exactly what we expect it to be, and therefore we keep going back, regardless of it could be better somewhere else, it could be worse. It's just easy. So it's the expansion of it. So that's first. The second thing is you have to have retention, because otherwise new logo growth doesn't matter. Because if I'm $100 in total sales and I lose 20% of my revenue every year, now I'm 80. Guess what? I don't have to grow 20% to grow. I have to grow 25, right? Because I have to grow 20 on 80. And so it's actually the idea of the expansion of revenue and retention of clients. That's the fundamental macro, your financial background asking the question. But here's the issue. Stop being lazy, people. Oh my God, I canceled 3. Here's the tirade. I canceled 3 software subscriptions last month because you know what? They're up for renewal in a month, and I hadn't heard from a single person in the organization. They hadn't sent me anything to tell me how to use their stuff. They didn't care about my personal outcomes. All they wanted to do is make sure legally that they had notified me so they could ping my card. You want to talk about the real problem with why people can't grow their companies from a standpoint of retention and expansion? It's because you don't have a relationship with your people. It goes back to our personas. If you don't understand what it is they are doing in their day, I'll tell you this. I used to serve as a fractional chief sales officer for companies that we worked with. And I told every single one of them, I can be in front of your clients in 3.5 weeks. And the reason is because I went in and became an expert on what the heck was going on in the client, what's going on in their world, what's going on in their position. What does a CXO want? What does a VP of whatever want? And I became an expert there because I had all the technical resources at the company level. So you want to know how to do this? put in policies and procedures that actually let you get to know your clients and allow you to actually document and make impact in their world. That's where the problem becomes. You know why you don't retain customers? Because you're sending them an email 30 days before you're going to ping them for $10,000. I don't know.
Well, okay. So the soapbox is, it's the relationship, stupid.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And it's caring enough. So here's one for you. Ready? This is what I tell everybody we work with, like, especially the individual producers in an account, in a client, right? Here's how you want to know how to make a massive amount of money and a massive amount of impact. Go home, kiss your kids, sleep well every single night. This is how you prioritize your life when it comes to work. Okay. You go client, company, me. You do that, and I promise you the me will have lots of money at the end of it. But everybody's putting me in front, including your company, who's saying, you know, you've got your CFO coming in and going, well, if we got an extra 10 cents, I mean, I'll tell you how to make impact. Stop becoming an item on a spreadsheet, give a damn about what they're doing, and absolutely try to impact their world in the best way you can. Because every company we've worked with has been able to expand margins. And it's because we do a better job of helping our clients figure out what their clients actually want and will pay for.
Very good stuff. I'll tell you, again, a lot of repurposing nuggets. So, you know, everybody listening and or watching, when you want to make sure that you go to b2bdm.com and do a search for Ken to be able to replay this and share this. That's for sure. Okay. So if I'm sitting here from a budgetary perspective, you know, we're all looking, especially this time of year, we're recording this in September, getting prepared for 2020. Some of those companies have not moved, have not made some adjustments. They're still even looking at their budgets. I think the whole, you know, let's just look at the reality of what we're in. I call this our pandemic era. We're going to be dealing with variants of something really for, I think, the rest of my life, quite frankly, and maybe even my kids' lives. It's just, it is what it is. And we need to just move on. So that means the whole trade show concept, the way it used to be, is not coming back. Yeah. When you look at the impact and effectiveness of, you know, the virtual trade show, you know, good luck with that. The world's changed. What do I need to be doing if I take off all of the blinders, or not the blinders, but the constraints of budget? Okay, I've got unlimited budget. I can do whatever I want. What should I do?
Yeah, here's an even better way than that. So I'm gonna, if I don't answer this question in a way that's satisfactory to you, just hit me between the eyes, because I'm going to change the way I answer it. Okay. Here's the one thing you can do, and it's a complete mindset change for those who have not pivoted, who still feel a little shell shocked in this environment, whatever. There's one thing that you can do substantially different. And if you'll shift your mindset, it will allow you to connect with your customers better, whether you're in marketing, sales, you're a CEO, or you're somebody installing stuff. And that's this. So this is not the first time that companies have gone through something economically that has been stressful, right? The Great Recession, the pandemic, and then think back as an example to 9/11, which is, at the time of this recording, is coming up pretty quick here. And so if I use 9/11 as the example, you know, we all remember probably where we were, those of us in the United States who are listening, and even maybe some that are international, but 9/11, there was this thing for about 18 to 24 months. And there were a series of changes in the way the world worked, but also in the way I felt about the world as a consumer. And so what I would say is this: not all those changes stuck, but there were certain things that did, right? There were inherently different things that did. The TSA thing stuck, whatever. So think about the pandemic and think about it in these terms. Say to yourself, okay, what are the things that are going to stick in regards to how my customers buy? What are the changes in their priorities based upon what we're seeing, right? And so whether that's, do we think safety and security is going to be a huge issue in your industry from now on that it wasn't before? Okay. Do we think remote working is going to be a bigger issue? Name the thing. There's stuff going on right now that I promise you is not going to stick. It's going to have a quick shelf life, like hopefully, you know, Dogecoin, just as a side note. There will be stuff that will happen, and there will be things that change. And so what I would say before you even worry about budget, worry about what's happening in the next 12 months and how what's going on impacts how people buy from you. Because the one thing we've not spoken about today is this simple fact. It is more important to match what you do to how your buyers buy than it is for you to create your own perfect internal process. And so that's what I would tell people. You know, as an example, we have last kind of piece of this. We have a marketing company that does brand identity. And they were kind of slow for this 12-month period. And I was looking at them, I go, guys, that you're just not being seen, because if brands aren't thinking about what their identity is to the consumer market in the middle of a pandemic, man, what a mistake they're making. So that's what I would say. I don't know. And so you're allowed to punch me back and say, that didn't answer it well enough. And I can try again.
Well, I mean, I do think that's important, you know, when you start, you know, saying that. We didn't get into the specifics on some of the things that I would do. And maybe that's appropriate, is because I think what you're saying is, let's first start with a mindset shift and change, you know, and then figure out what we need to do in order to be able to execute upon that.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that, and then if you want the specific thing, in 2-3 sentences or less, figure out the right questions to ask and the metrics to follow, and the questions you're asking before this podcast and the metrics you're following before this podcast are probably not complete enough, good enough, and may not even be the right questions.
Ken Lundin, I had a great time chatting with you today. And for those of you who want to do a search, you need to make sure that you spell Lundin correct, because it's actually Lundin. Ken, how does the B2B digital marketer gang get in touch with you?
Yeah, awesome. So probably 2 things. You can go to the website, and right there you can, you know, if you wanted to talk to me, you can schedule something or talk to somebody on my team. But I would tell you the number one way, just search Ken Lundin, as we said. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes. Hook up with me on LinkedIn and shoot me a note and tell me you saw me here. I'd love to hear. Like, if you vehemently disagree with everything I said, let me know that. And then on the other hand, if you liked a few things or you got some questions, I'd be glad to jump on a call and answer some.
Ken Lundin, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you for joining us. Go now to join the B2B DM gang in the B2B Marketer LinkedIn group, where you can connect with other B2B DM disruptors and get access to our B2B DM cheat sheets, checklist, and guides. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, please help by going to iTunes to rate, review, and subscribe. And share the show on all of your digital platforms. Be sure to tune in next week for our next episode. And always remember, you can automate your lead capture, but you must lure your lead.